Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Today we will be building the second half of the Nazgul knife, the Dark Rider's ring-wraith's dagger that stabbed Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. We will be completing the last portion, the second half of that build. I look forward to having you with me. Let's jump in the truck, get to the shop, and get started. After breaking the blade of the first file, I was pretty impatient, more so than I normally am, to get this thing back up and on track. I like working with twisted metal. It gives me a lot of opportunity to make something that would otherwise be maybe droll and just straightforward boring. Give it some personality, especially depending on how you go about twisting it. What I'm twisting here is I'm making some of the guard structure that's going to go on the handle, and I'm making this so that it would fit a pair of gauntlets, a pair of medieval gauntlets that are going to go into this, so it would still work for a warrior. Every now and then I am lucky enough to have the design abilities of my child present, and she helped me getting this dagger laid out. And if I can be completely honest, her design abilities were just dreadful. It's like she didn't really know how to draw, like she was only 6 years old or something. So I kicked her off and told her to stand back and watch Daddy burn his shop down. And while the jaws that I described to you that actually hold the blade into the handle are dragon, my interpretation of a dragon's head, these, I wanted the reverse of this to actually be to look like kind of an exotic deer as best I could. I am terrible at carving or etching metal. I am terrible at it, but I got this as close to a deer's head as possible, and I think it actually turned out looking good. The reason for that is if this knife was in the possession of a once powerful king, what would a powerful king want adorning his blade? Well, he might want a dragon. He might want something formidable like that, but he also might have had a dagger that had an elk's head or a stag or a deer on it. So the reverse has that, and then you flip it over to the blade, and it's a dragon's jaws holding the actual blade piece. Now I'm going ahead and start making the actual guard itself. The actual guard itself is not super intricate, but I did want to make it from a single piece. I wanted to make a ringlet for a gauntleted finger, an armored finger, to be able to go through on the left side of the blade and then be held fast on the right-hand side of the blade, all by one piece. So it took a little bit of engineering, as you'll see here. As you may or may not agree, but you can see here how a piece of just straight iron is very ordinary, very meh. You put some twists in it, you give it a little bit of a taper, of a bevel here and there, and then all of a sudden it takes a different character altogether. And what I'm doing here after I've welded that on is I'm actually taking a look at how it's going to fit in the right hand. I want it to actually sort of capture the right hand as if the right hand had a gauntlet. And you'll see how I bracket that in with this piece here. I'm going to wrap it back across the right-hand side of the right hand so that it captures it both with the ringlet and the gauntlet can be fit inside that extra piece. I hate using the Dremel. I'm not a delicate woodworker. I'm not a delicate iron worker of any sort, but at times it's the only tool for the job, and it did okay. And now comes the part where we're gonna go ahead and put the edge on this thing. I wrestled back and forth with getting a really, really narrow, really sharp edge on this thing. I did end up making it pretty darn sharp, but at the point where I was starting to make it exceptionally sharp, perhaps, I stopped. I just put a basic tool edge on there, at least for now. I don't want it to be something that I'm handling in one hand, looking at it, and having someone else look at it and it end up cutting them or worse. As I do with the majority of the metal work and the implements that I make, I'm oil darkening this. It's a nice way to protect the metal. It gives it a dark look without having to use paint, which for this weapon, it absolutely needed to have a dark finish to it. And then when I'm done, I will do this on pretty much anything that I oil darken. I'm going to go ahead and take that sanding sponge and just hit the raised edges of this. Gives it a little bit more of a highlight. Now, even though I said that I wasn't going to put a super sharp edge on this, I still wanted to use the honing stone to remove the sanding marks, if you will. And then you got to stop and every now and then just take a look at the beautiful weather that God's provided for us. So here's the first test. Gauntlet is on. How does it fit? How does it sink in with the gauntlet? And it worked extremely, kind of spookily well. One thing to notice is the orientation of the handle in the hand. It's not held like a regular dagger whatsoever, and that was very intentional. And here it is in all of its, I can't say glory, but in something. Well, thank you for joining me. That was an interesting build. It was a rewarding build. I could call it that. I am pleased in some areas with how this came out. It came out pretty much exactly the way that I wanted it to and the way that I imagined that it would. Things that I learned. I learned something that I relearned it. I've known it in the past. I've made the same mistakes in the past when it comes to this, but this is a file that I used. And a file is something that you can call tool steel. And tool steel, when I say tool steel, they're almost always going to be heat treated or case hardened or quenched already. The file that I used at first, as a file, had already been heat treated. And I went in and I did it again. I got it red hot, and as you saw, I quenched it. And then when I went to work with it and actually move it a little bit, it shattered like a glass plate. What I should have done is annealed it and got it red hot and then let it cool to room temperature slowly. And that'll actually soften the metal, making it more ductile and easier for me to work. And then I could have quenched it if I wanted to. But with a file and most tool steels, you don't need to quench them. They're already exactly the hardness that they need to be for it to be a knife or a blade or an implement of sorts. The other thing that I learned in this build is one that I was not expecting to learn on this. I felt along the way when I was designing this knife and the concept of this knife in my head, I felt a resistance inside of me towards designing something whose purpose is 100% sinister in nature, evil in nature, to be used by an ill doer for ill goods, perhaps. And with this particular knife, because of how it was designed and how it was made and what my concept was made for, I was at unease most of the time. So much so, by the time that I was done making this, I had to admit to myself that I didn't actually want this. I didn't like it. I didn't want this knife in my life, the life of my family and at my home. When we create things, whether it is a physical creation, a drawing, a painting, prose, poetry, music, actual items that we build, we are creating something. We are creating things that carry a weight to us. They have a meaning to us. They have a pull on us in good or in bad. And you can make things, even if they're just ideas, you can conceptually think of things whose existence to you is not a net positive. That is the case with this. That is the case with this knife. This wouldn't be a knife that I would have presented anywhere for someone to see it. It would probably sit on a shelf of mine somewhere. And when somebody ever comes across it or I show it to them, I'd have to explain the intent behind it. And honestly, I don't really want that sort of energy in my life. Now, the irony there is I make weapons all the time. I make armor all the time. And weapons, you could say, well, weapons are made to do harm. And that's absolutely the case. But there are many examples in my mind of weapons that have a nobility to them, a purpose to them, yes, but don't have an evil purpose. Obviously, there are knights in shining armors. There's castles on the hill, so to speak. There are good guys that used weapons and needed weapons to do good. Those are the types of things that I tend to be drawn to, not always. This particular knife was built in concept to be used for a horrific purpose, terrible beings, under the cover of darkness, doing evil and sinister things. That said, it's unfortunate because I really do like the end result of this in terms of what I set out to build and what it ended up being. I'm proud of this. So then the question becomes what to do. I won't gift this to somebody. I'm not going to give this to a friend or even an enemy, so to speak. I thought about, well, I can just destroy it, cut it up, chop it up, recycle it. And that didn't feel quite right either. So
I head out towards a forsaken land. Unnoticed by a tormented sun whose days have gone down in the west, behind those hills into shadow. Up a high cleft where the thrush once knocked. Down an old path. Beyond a secret gate. Over a swinging bridge for the daughter of the river. Into deep canyons that were once survivors of vast forgotten woods. Branches swayed and groped without any wind. Over rock and under tree. Through shadows where the mulips once dwelled. Past hollow halls beneath the fells. Ridge behind ridge that vanish out of eyesight without a guess. Where once tall trees aging no quicker than the hills told old tales of high and distant mountains. Down an old, forgotten stair. As you go down to the water, they said, you will find that trees will fail, and you'll come to a barren country. They said the river there flows in stony vales. I took this Nazgul blade and cast it into a frozen river that never finds the sea. Where now it lays, in a dark and windless mirror.